Okay, this is a good chance to spiel. In addition to doing a couple panels, I'm also assistant director for MAGFest. MAGFest is the Music and Gaming Education Symposium. In these, and it's a sort of an offshoot of panels in which people discuss these, sometimes more academic, but or in general, just more evaluative aspects of games. People in which you might go a little deeper into how games work, how games are designed, the culture around games, things of that nature. And we used to be known as the gaming intellectuals, but over the last few years we've grown into something of our own. And we've been bringing out a lot more panels in this vein. So maybe one better question to ask is, what kind of interest do you have in games? What drew you to this panel today? Yeah?
I'm interested in the kind of like the psychology of video games, and just interested in how kind of role psychology plays in games. Because I know Riot Games, for example, they had a really big problem with raging and trolls and whatnot, and they've hired people on specifically to tackle those problems, and it's been getting better.
There have been some discussions. Arthur Chu ran a panel, I think, on gaming culture, and especially with a lot of the trolls and rage stuff. Anyone else? Get in front.
Well, I actually work at a small indie studio in Manassas, so coming to these is like a really way to definitely learn some things that might not be apparently obvious while you're just making games on your own.
Mm-hmm. Yes?
I'm working with a non-profit organization currently designing a board game for therapeutic use.
Mm.
And they're going to clinical trials, I think, probably within the year. But right now we're just designing, making sure all the rules work, and we're going to probably be ready for first play testing run within the next 2 or 3 months.
Very cool. And behind you?
MAGFest is my primary reason for coming to MAGFest. I've been to a significant number of panels, and I love gaming in its own right, but I also love understanding the mechanism and the theory and the psychology behind it and around it.
So I will give you a round of applause for about here. You have your hand raised in the front?
Yeah, I'm a creative producer. I work on educational games for children, and I'm always looking for ways that we can make our products better.
Mm-hmm. Someone had their hand in the back? Yeah?
I'm a voice actor, and I think it's interesting to see how, and I think this goes across almost any media platform, but how to go ahead and figure out how to manipulate people's feelings and how they feel and how they receive things. I know that sounds terrible, but but I meant how to understand to get the emotion you want to evoke and the reaction you want to evoke.
Awesome. Well, that's a really great diverse series of answers, and it shows to the different types of people that mages and mages panels can appeal to. So maybe some of you knew more about mages than others, but I have a question. What kinds of panels or what kinds of subjects that you didn't see on the guidebook this year would you like to see at future Mages and MAGFest events? If you don't have an answer right now, that's fine. You can think on that. Let me know afterwards. Yeah? In the back again?
Voice acting.
Sorry.
On the voice acting side, I think it'd be more interesting not to learn just how music is created in games, but also audio is created in games, more like sound engineering kind of stuff. So like the sound effects and what that process is like and putting it into a game.
I think the OC Remix people, with whom I'm affiliated, can tell you more about that as well, because it's true, it's mostly music related, but there are some mechanics around the actual sound as well. In the front?
I was thinking there are a lot of great design talks naturally, but it might be cool if they had a talk where they specifically focused on one game and picked apart the mechanics of that, or looked at how it works.
So kind of like how Ego Raptor did with Mega Man. Well, yeah. Yes?
It would be, I guess, 2 things. The first thing would be good to have it a little more spaced out, but then this one is at the exact same time as the other Q&A feedback one, which would be really beneficial.
Which one?
There's another, right next door, there's another evaluating player feedback or something like that.
No, this evaluating feedback is me.
There's another similar topic.
Let me see.
That would be, right step outside of the screen.
Oh, the value of game critique and reviews?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So having them maybe split up.
Well, I don't know. Let me see who's behind that one. Oh, the virtual fools, okay. Yeah, so that's a good point. And and that's feedback I can take back, sort of maybe stretching them out thematically and making sure. Okay, awesome, that's good. Anything else? Yes?
Not to sound repetitive, but maybe something about therapeutic uses of gaming.
Mm-hmm.
Applications for different kinds of, abuse victims or, self-esteem or attachment issues, things like that.
Okay.
I was here last year and I didn't see anything for it either, and then.
Okay, so
I think
listen,
that's
you guys can do me a favor. This is some great stuff. If you guys wouldn't mind just coming back up to me afterwards and I'll write this stuff down. But right now, it looks, well, actually we have 2 minutes. So, yeah, 2 minutes if you guys don't mind chilling out. Anything else? People are starting to filter, that's good. Yeah?
I think I'd be interested to see a panel kind of looking a little bit at how games, I guess for lack of a better word, manipulate emotion. Like there are a lot of little indie games coming out, like, I don't know if anyone's heard of Loneliness. That's a really great game where you're just this little cube and you can move around and it looks like you're trying to dodge the other cubes, but stuff, I kind of gave it away already, but like just games like that, are really cool, and just kind of like exploring emotion.
Okay. This is good stuff, because what we're at Majors are trying to do is do a better job of seeking feedback from, our fans, the interested folks from throughout the year. What oftentimes happens is that the panelists, we come up with ideas and they think, we think people will find this cool, and either they do or they don't. So getting more direct feedback from you guys, I think, is going to be the first step in developing and driving Majors further. So awesome. And with that, it's 12 on the dot, so let's get started. Thank you all for coming. I'm glad to see this turn out, especially as other people mentioned with other panels going on. My name is Jeremy Pesner, or the Pez Man. I've been doing game studies and talks at Majors and MAGFest for quite a few years now. It's not my day job, but it is something I have background in, and I've pulled this together for you today. For those of you who are at 8.5, I did something very similar then. But the good news is, I don't think most of you have seen this before because there were like 7 people at my panel last time. So, gaming ethnography, how to discern and evaluate player experience. Obviously, this is important for anybody who wants to work with games in any sort of capacity. The idea is that you want to get a much better idea of what people like or dislike about the game in any stage of development or production. This can be useful if you're a designer and you want to see that the elements you're designing are working. This can be useful if if you have a finished game and you're trying to make something like it, but you want to make it better, figure out what people didn't like about the product that you're inspired by. And this is good even if you're a reviewer, just to sort of see if you want to understand how you feel about this game and how other people might feel about it too. Yes, the idea is that here we're going to provide a bit of a systematic way to figure out what people's opinions are, even if they're not necessarily right on the surface. And if you think that, these people are professional game designers, well, they wouldn't make something that the players would find so terrible. Well, why don't we see what happens in one of the most famous games from a while back. Quick show of hands, how many of you have not played this game? Okay. For those of you who have not played this game, what do you think is going on here? Okay, okay, so you're trying to push it down, anything else? Okay, the mechanic is not being made apparent. So, alright. This actually goes on for a bit longer. So, for those who don't know, this is Sonic 3. It was one of my favorite games growing up. In fact, if you see me around the con, I actually have the Sonic hat that I wear at every MAGFest. And when I got to this point in Carnival Night Zone, the first time I ever played this, I was this guy for like a few weeks. We didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have, you know, an easy way for me to figure out what was going on. I eventually had to call up a friend, and he said, well, he told me what you had to do. Eventually, what you found, well, as I discovered, the answer to this problem was really simple. All you had to do was press up and down on the keypad. That's it. But as this person said in the front, this was not made apparent. No other barrel in the level required you to do that. They all moved up and down of their own accord. So to suddenly show up on this barrel, which had, you know, no way of moving back up and down its own, you had to manipulate it yourself, that came completely out of left field. And somehow it was not caught in any sort of player testing, and it was released with, it was released to all markets with this big problem. And to this point today, it's been being made fun of in fan films like this one. So let's talk a little bit more about what was going on here. Let's, I already sort of explained this part, but if anyone wants to add any clarifying statements, what was the problem?
Lack of communication.
Okay, lack of communication.
They didn't do thorough enough testing.
They didn't do thorough testing.
Unobvious goals.
Unobvious goals.
Wanted the barrel to go down, or launch you up, or what
Yeah.
was trying to happen.
By the way, yeah, you can just, for stuff like this, you can just call out. I don't need to call you.
Some previous demonstrations of how the mechanic is supposed to work, and then it changes portions.
Okay, the previous demonstration to change courses from those.
Something I noticed was that there were no like visual or audio cues to show why the barrel was behaving the way it did. Whether
No
it was
visual
because
or audio
of the
cues to
character
show.
leaping on it or because of the inputs you were making.
Okay, I like that. No visual audio cues. So, how do you think this happened? Why did this show up in the game at all?
They thought it was new and different.
Okay, they thought it was new and different.
There might have been another way to bypass that certain area. The playtester just bypassed it.
It's possible. There may have been another way to get past it, and it was not noticed by the average gamer.
Content cuts. Maybe there was a mechanic before it, but it got cut.
Okay, maybe it was present elsewhere, but it was never. But there were elements cut that didn't make it apparent then. Yes.
The testers might have been familiar with the product already and had already went in with the expectation of how to.
So testers already had certain expectations in mind. Yeah, just you can call out really.
Maybe like they started to work on it, but then they kind of like got sidetracked by other things, so they just forgot to put in an explanation.
So it became a lower priority. All right. How might this have been prevented?
Proper testing.
Proper testing. Can you expand on that?
That's the game tester's job to test every aspect of the level. They should have caught that from the start when they were testing that level.
So the tester wasn't thorough enough? Okay.
I also think it's the test creator's fault as well. They should have a set parameters of what the expected outcome is. And it was like, yes, got through the level, but no, did this mechanic become inherent? And it wasn't.
So there wasn't a goal defined by the tester.
Lack of diversity in the testing panel, we need a variety of ages and experience levels.
Okay, so maybe there weren't enough testers or enough types of testers.
Well, same side, the designer should have known new design level. If this is a new mechanic that hasn't been introduced, it's not being practiced.
So maybe it was poor design. All right, so we've generated a lot of different ideas and possibilities for just this one little thing in this one level of one game. And what I'm going to show you here is something called ethnography, which is really just the practice of studying people and their customs. The idea, this can actually take on several different forms, whether it can be direct interaction, or if we're talking about ethnography of a tribe, you know, in the hearts of Africa, you might not want to disturb their practices. You might be a silent observer and try and not interfere with them as much as possible. The practice is generally qualitative, in that people assign, you know, it's not numerical. People assign descriptive qualities to them, and the idea is that we're not really talking about statistics, we're not trying to talk about hard numbers, we're just trying to describe what's going on in as much detail with as much accuracy as possible. And as I mentioned, this can go anywhere from native tribes to interactions in hospitals to fan communities. And these studies, depending on how they work, may last for months up to years, depending on the parameters of the ethnography experiment. By its very nature, a lot of it is sort of improvised because you don't know what's going to happen. If you're surveying a scene that you don't know much about already, you sort of have to roll with the punches and try and explore new things as they're happening. So there have been some uses of ethnography in gaming. This is about as academic as I'm going to get, by the way. Usually usually I've seen them used in MMOs. I know one person in this room is pretty familiar with this sort of thing. And so there are some game researchers who really use this type of ethnographic experience to understand communities in the online space. And then that's a key aspect of ethnography. It's usually used to analyze groups of people rather than individual people. But it's good because people want to know how they interact with one another. I'm going to use it in a more, yes?
Didn't they use WoW for like plague spread in a similar method to this?
You mean tracking the spread of disease?
Yeah.
They did, but that's a little different. That's more about considering people as agents and how they come into contact with each other. That's something that can be generally analyzed through quantitative methods, like binary. Did this person contact this other person? This is more rich in the sense that we want people to understand like the emotions, the cultures, the nature of the interactions, that type of thing. So that's a good point. But yeah, so there are different levels of sociology at play in virtual worlds. But the type that I'm referring to here has to do with how people interact with each other as people, not as carriers of disease. So in this case, I'm going to use it in a more individualized context. What exactly do I mean by that? I'm going to use something called grounded theory. The idea is that this is how we build a theory through data gathering and data collection. At the time this was proposed, this was extremely novel because we had established theories of sociology that most studies would either choose to see if their studies fit. And these theories, the proponents of grounded theory realized, were kind of becoming outmoded, and there was no way, if you weren't a preeminent scholar, to come up with a theory of your own. So this has been proposed in the late 1960s, but has had various incarnations over the decades since. The one that I first learned this one was from a woman named Kathy Sharmaz in 2006. Well, that's the book I read. And the most important thing about grounded theory is it's data-driven, so you want to try to not let your assumptions guide the thinking. You want to be as data-driven and objective as you possibly can. Now, obviously, the people, the developers, people have had various attitudes on this. Some people say you should not know anything about the site that you're studying before conducting a grounded theory study, but most people realize that's more or less impossible. So the idea is to be as conscientious of it as possible, and to try and approach this in an even-handed, even-keeled, unbiased manner. And so the idea is you just want to rely on what you're seeing rather than what you think things are your prior experience may have shown. Let's talk about how grounded theory actually works. The idea is that it starts off with code, which are small, tangible ideas observed through data. These are very specific, very targeted, very focused, and it has nothing to do with computer code, which took me a while to get over. But it's just something very tangible that you can point to. You can say it's soft, it's blue. I'm looking at the spells here, or it's white, or it's. We're talking about people. We're talking about generally easy qualities to measure. Stuff like that. The categories are groupings of codes that come together to form a wider sense of the data. These are not so specific. These are a higher level, and you reach these categories by bringing different codes together. And you'll see, and so you see that these categories are higher level groupings that describe the codes that make them up. So you're proceeding one level up. And after that, theory is kind of, bringing those categories together and establishing a relationship between those categories. So we move from codes, which are very specific, to categories which describe groups of codes, up to theory, which describes, the different types of categories. And this seems a bit vague, I will totally grant you that, and that's because I'm describing it in about 30 seconds. But let's see what happens with an example. So, what kind of site do you think we should use to test this out? Well, this is just me thinking, but I know one that we're all familiar with would be MAGFest. Why not? So, let's think of some codes that might describe MAGFest. Remember, codes are very specific, they're unambiguous, and they are stuff that we can easily notice and measure.
Colossus roller.
Okay. I know that's kind of a joke, but remember that people outside MAGFest would have no idea what that is.
Games.
Games. Music.
Smells.
Smell. Lots of smells. Cosplay. What's a festival?
Like a celebration or gathering.
Okay. Celebration and gathering could mean something very different throughout the world, right? That I would call that more of a category. Okay, there are lots of people. Okay, here are the ones that I came up with. We have arcade cabinets. Obviously, those we can point to what those are. Costumes. Lots of people don't dress normally. Merchandise. People are buying lots of things. Band performances. We have lots of different people that are playing music. Alcohol. Self-explanatory. And camaraderie. People who are getting along with each other and becoming friends, and who are friends, and really having these positive interactions with each other. So with these and the other codes that we've come up with, what are some categories that we might imagine? Remember, categories now are groupings of codes. They're a little higher up. These are things that can be a bit more vague and more site-specific. But because we have these codes backing them up, we have a better idea of what they mean.
So cosplay as camaraderie and costumes?
Cosplay as camaraderie and costumes, all right.
Nerdiness.
Nerdiness. All right, that's good, and this helps us to clarify what nerdiness we're talking about.
Game tournaments?
Game tournaments. Well, that might be more of a code in the sense that we can point to. That's a tournament, you know? Yeah?
Commerce and social commerce.
Commerce and social commerce. I like that. Anything else? Okay. Here's what I came up with. Video game cultural artifacts. Items and other aspects of culture that really represent video games, and celebratory practices. As you can see, each of these codes kind of match up to one of those categories. And because we have already established what these codes are, these categories make more sense. You know, celebratory practices could mean very different things the world over, but we know what they mean here at MAGFest because of what we've already defined. So, we've got our codes, we've got our categories. What's our theory? What is our theory of MAGFest?
People come together to celebrate video game culture and artifacts.
Okay.
With alcohol.
That's actually very close to what I had. MAGFest is an event where people come to have a good time and enjoy video game culture. That's pretty easy. We all already knew that, right? I hope. The idea here is that we were able to do this very easily because we already know what MAGFest is. We've already spent time here, and it's very easy for people to describe MAGFest to somebody else. But imagine we're going into uncharted territory, places where no or few people have ever been before. That might take a bit longer. But we're going to do it in a bit of a compressed time period here. And we're going to apply these to a few specific games that I've chosen to see what kind of experiences people can have in a very short time. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite people up here to play different games, and you and I are going to observe what they're doing. We're going to ask them questions, and we're going to understand what they're going through right as they're going through it. And for those of you who volunteer to play, don't be surprised if we're able to touch on some things that you didn't even realize you were thinking. I'm going to go deep here, in the strictly metaphorical sense. So the idea is that we want to remember to observe the player and their actions. This is the data that we're using. You know, we don't want to try and ascribe our own thoughts, motivations, anything like that to what they're doing. And if we have any questions about what those think, we should ask them. We want to try and give them as much autonomy and respect their decisions and their practices as possible. By the same token, we don't want to really help them through the game. If they get really stuck, I might jump in, but on the whole, we're going to let them explore, make their own, have their own successes and failures on their own. When you do ask questions, these are very specific and focused. I'll be doing this up here, but you want to say, why did you choose to do this? Or what was your motivation behind that? Not just saying, how are you having a good time? Are you having fun? Is this enjoyable? And we want to ensure that they talk about more data rather than less. We want to, push them on things. If something sounds vague or you're not quite sure about them, ask them to follow up. Ask them, make sure we're getting as specific and as grounded as we possibly can be. So, who wants to come up here and play a game? All right. In the back on the left, my left. You haven't said anything. So come on up. What's your name?
Jordan.
Jordan. Let's give Jordan a hand. Oh no. I hope so. Me. All right. So the first game I was going to try is experiencing some problems. This is what happens when you rely on a browser. So I have to ask you a different question. What kind of games have you played?
I played.
Sorry, can you scroll? I want to make sure people can hear you. So grab the microphone. All right.
I play multiple types of games. I play fighting games, first-person shooters, racing games, board games.
Have you played this game?
World of View?
No, the one that I've highlighted.
Oh, BBB, yes.
I'm sorry, I need someone up here who hasn't played this game before. The first game I was going to show people decided to crash. You guys both talked already. Okay, come on.
Sorry, I can switch. Maybe there's a different game to play. Okay,
Sorry about that. My game decided to be cooperative, so we're going to move right along here. Sorry, and you are?
Blake Church.
Blake shares. Okay, so Blake is going to play this game. For those of you who have played this game, again, I'm going to encourage you not to say anything about it. We're going to let Blake have his own experience.
Shiny.
Okay, so now Blake. I mean, we're going to give you, I'm not going to really give you much guidance here. But I will say I did pick this game in particular. I picked all the games in particular because I knew it would be possible to have meaningful experiences in a short amount of time. So, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to let you start playing, and the rest I'm going to put about 10 minutes on the timer. Although we've got a decent amount of time, so it's not a strict limit. But and again, those of you who watch him, let's pay attention to what he's doing and how he's doing it. All right, so let's go. You can get started. We're going to start with a new game. Yes, that's fine. All right. For those of you who haven't played this game, you'll enjoy a nice show. Uh-oh.
Suddenly very quiet.
All right. Ooh, that's it. Now remember, if you guys have any questions for Blake as he's doing this, just be sure to shout them out. Blake, what kind of game do you think this is?
Looks like some kind of action platformer. I'm a little suspicious of seeing these guys with these stop signs for heads. I'm wondering if we're going to be entering some kind of wacky dream state or something.
Okay.
So I'm not completely confident.
Can you turn down the mic volume? It's a little hard to hear you guys.
Sure, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think those C's do?
Hmm?
What do you think the C's
It's a
do?
good question, Blake. Do you have any idea what those C's do?
Checkpoint as best as I can tell.
What makes you think that?
Because that.
Ah, there we go. So Blake,
Why did you go back down once you went up to that really high?
why did you go back down?
Exploring and getting a feel, so I wanted to know if I could change direction while I was in the air.
Okay. So Blake was exploring some mechanics here. He wanted to know exactly. He saw the. So let me ask you. Expand a little bit more on that.
You knew what you could do, and you were trying to figure out more what you could do?
Right, so checkpoints were easy because I had a lot of context from back when I was in high school
So you had a lot
Sega
of-
Sonic games.
This is important. He had a lot of context for what he was seeing here. So he's bringing prior experiences to this game.
And then, so yeah, definitely wanted to explore and see what's going on. Knowing that there's this like gravity flip thing, I want to make sure that I'm exploring the nooks and crannies. Also, because the 8-bitness of it, I don't know, I'm kind of suspecting, like hidden passages or something somewhere.
And what brings you to suspect that? You said the 8-bitness, but can you clarify?
A lot of the old school, like even Zelda and stuff had, secret passages and things like that. So that's always something to keep an eye out for.
So once again, he's bringing his prior experiences to this game. That can be very important to depending on what kind of playtest you
What kind
have.
of games do you usually play?
I play just about everything.
What do you fucking use terminal to do?
Either give me information or allow me to alter the map. Looks like it's giving me information.
We've already discovered some very important things here. When I've play tested, when I've done this thing with other people who are less experienced with games, the reactions and the ways they explore are very different.
What kind of strategies are you forming?
Just, I'm avoiding those out of habit. Again, prior experience, if it moves, it's probably bad.
You're playing one-handed. Why is that?
Why did you run it there?
Yeah, did you know that was going to happen?
I didn't know that was going to happen, but at the same time, because it was a different color than everything else, I didn't trust it.
Okay. So this is important here. He's looking for differences in the environment and for cues in what he should or should not do. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
How does that feel the control skills to you?
Okay, how do you feel?
Fine, they're good, responsive. Nope. That I didn't expect. Because gray kind of feels like a background thing to me, so to be walking along and then when I got close to something gray, to have it do something.
What's the action?
I think it's space, but.
Okay. While he's listening to this, what are some codes that seem to be coming up here?
Sort of instincts, like learned experiences from other standard mechanics that are being carried through from other gaming experiences.
That's a long code. Can we press that?
Learned behaviors.
Learn behaviors. Okay, platformer in the back, you said?
Hazardous objects.
Hazardous objects.
Checkpoints.
Checkpoints. Okay, well, exploration can mean different things, right? What can we come up with a code? Secrets. I might suggest. I might suggest accelerated learning because he has this prior experience.
What do you think about the story so far?
Okay, are you paying attention to the story?
I am paying attention to the story. As I die horribly.
What's happening in the story?
So far as I know, I've gotten. And it's things like that that make me wonder. Shipwreck got abandoned trying to catch back up. I missed a little bit of the last dialogue, but.
So why are you trusting these moving platforms when before you said you don't trust things that move?
So on the previous screen, there were moving platforms. There was a moving platform over a bit of spike. I had no choice but to trust it.
Okay, so that's actually very interesting from a game design perspective. You want to introduce certain elements to people. What's the best way to do that? Put them in a situation where they have to move through it. And then by so doing, they learn how to trust it. That's very interesting.
Is there a reason why you chose not to interact with the yellow objects and said yes?
Yeah, why did you, okay, so why were the yes things?
So again, they were moving and I didn't have to trust them, therefore I did not trust them.
Is the fact that there were 2 checkpoints nearby a cue that they might not be trustworthy? So many checkpoints in this area?
Potentially, I wasn't aware of that.
So I think trust is something that we're going to come back to again and again here. That sounds like more of a category to me, but this is something that we're hearing come up a lot of this. What do you trust, what do you not trust, what do you move through, what do you avoid?
What are you thinking about death right now in this video?
So death is pretty. Death is fairly inexpensive, which I'm not seeing any specific number of lives on the screen or something like that. So yeah, I'm fairly comfortable with dying over and over and over again. That is a little concerning to me because action platformers aren't necessarily my best type of game, and I get the feeling like this could get really hard if I have infinite lives. Because there's no cost for failure, and therefore I'm likely to fail frequently.
Okay.
What made you decide to give up on that room a minute ago?
Is that too hard?
So that other shiny object, I skipped it. It looked like it was going to be too hard, and right now I just want to explore the game. I don't want to necessarily try to perfect it.
Would that decision be changed if you weren't playing in front of a bunch of people?
Probably not, actually.
Okay.
Heaven.
Does the fact that you have infinite lives detach you from any kind of story that might be happening in the game?
No, it does reduce my risk, so I can, I'm happy taking risks and seeing where that takes me.
Is there something else that's, there's something else that, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is there something else that makes you feel a little more freewheeling and risk, able to take risks?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Other than.
What about the checkpoints?
Well, yeah, it's, right, there's no penalty for death.
But how often do you see these checkpoints?
Very frequently.
Okay. That's something else that I sort of wanted to get out there. You're getting a lot of checkpoints in this game. And what do you think that means?
That means each map is its own problem. You're rewarded for solving the problem.
Each map has its own problem and you're rewarded for solving the problem.
And I noticed like each map has its own name.
Yes.
Also.
Yes, I was gonna see what.
Which I just wondered, like, why?
Well, that's a good question. Why?
Yeah, I've noticed that this one was Driller and this one was Sorrow. Those are the only two that I really noticed.
So it is. So he was able to go through everything until now without even noticing the names. That does say something interesting about his attention, where his actual point of focus is.
I also noticed the face changed. It's not sad anymore. It's kind of happy.
Oh, your face is just upside down.
Do you think that the names of the room are giving you any kind of like guidance or clues?
Well, that's actually. Yeah, that's not I'm not used to. Right, so I was absolutely looking for when I was having trouble on that previous level. I was absolutely looking for hints in the names as I was looking around for clues. Maybe that's gray, so.
All right. We're gonna call in here.
Sure.
Well, first we're gonna go through this, but let's give Blake a hand. Do that so I can. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what happened here. Sure. Now you were talking a lot about the prior experiences that you had that were informing this game.
Sure.
You've been playing games for how long?
Oh, 32 years? 33?
Okay. So you're bringing various points of experience from all of that into this game. Do you have people you know in your life who don't play games as often?
Yes, I do.
And what happens when you show them games?
It depends on the game. A lot of times they are missing that context, and so that was actually something I was very aware of as I started this game and you guys started asking me questions about it. Is that, that I became very self-aware of all of the little things. That checkpoints are often small, about waist height and round, and there's all kinds of tiny little messages. I've become very, very aware of noticing that within my own gameplay.
Interesting. Okay, so let's get back to our codes and categories. Let's refresh some of the codes that we've been talking about. We had checkpoints. We had we had risk. We had secrets. We had moving. We had things that were moving. Movement played a big part here.
Color.
Color. Environmental hazards.
Would the flipping mechanic be a code of itself?
Yeah, the flipping. I mean, that's an integral part of the game. So we have a lot of flipping, and actually more than that, we have exploring the flipping mechanic, because you were trying to see. You said you were trying to see how far you could push it, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So someone else, yeah. Don't story.
Directed falling.
Directed falling. You don't need to raise your hands.
Spaceships and teleporters. Spaceships and teleporters.
Okay, spaceships and teleporters. Awesome. So, what kinds of categories do you think we can come up with these?
Game mechanics?
Okay, we're talking mechanics. Mechanics are a very huge part of what we're talking about here, as opposed to more shorter-term games.
I don't know if you have more slides, but I just.
No, yeah, I know. I had to unplug that. That was strategic.
Okay.
The game was still going. I didn't want people to get distracted.
Failure.
Failure. So we're talking, yes, failure that's a very good category, because failure, you see he was not afraid of failing multiple times. Because you saw that there was no real penalty for doing so. Not only did you have infinite lives, but you had frequent checkpoints.
Right, so even if I died, I only lost a couple of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I noticed was that not only was there no life counter indicating that you could keep dying, but there was also no death counter indicating that the game didn't really care whether you got through it.
At least
or
not one that you
not.
can see.
Sorry?
At least not one that you can see.
Yeah, at least not one that you could see. Maybe that might not be the case. I haven't actually played it all.
Mm-hmm.
There is a death counter, but you have to go and find it.
Yeah. That was my subtle illusion. What else?
Risk reward?
Risk reward. So yeah, the idea is how much risk do you have to take and what reward do you get for doing so? Yeah?
I guess like problem solving in the fact that it's not the same mechanic. It's getting harder and harder. You're presenting different boards, different maps per room. So that has a different.
So maybe diversity of challenge?
Yeah, it's not like Pac-Man where the monsters get faster. It's a different mechanic that you're looking to do.
Yeah, so we saw at this level, and this is coming at first levels in minigames, that they were introducing different mechanics, and that they had a very targeted way of doing so. So would you say that's accurate? You were learning different mechanics in this first level.
Sure, I mean, because I was dodging monsters, I was dodging environmental hazards, I was navigating the environment, so there are a number of different kinds of challenges. There was good diversity.
Okay, so what's our theory of this game? At least as he played it. How would we describe what we've seen of VVVVV, or V, as sometimes we call it?
Action platformer.
Well, okay, we've described its genre. I'm talking about the experience that you've had, based on everything that we've talked about.
I'm curious, what do you think about the aesthetics of the game? The soft colors and the...
Okay, visual aesthetic is important here.
Visual aesthetic is important. At first it wasn't a draw. I mean, I've seen ads for the game before, but I never picked it up, largely because of the visual aesthetic. It seemed very, rudimentary. I mean, I like retro, but it seemed extra retro.
Do you believe that now still?
I think they do have some solid game mechanics under it, so, graphics do help sell a game, but it is the gameplay that makes a good game a good game, so, I think in some ways the aesthetics, while they detracted a bit initially, the challenge of the game actually came through.
So
how
much of what you described as solid gameplay was solely attributable to novelty?
Not much. I've played similar games. Kind of reminds me of N, if anybody played N or N+. So, it's navigating an environment. I've seen the gravity flip thing before.
But it was applied differently.
It was applied differently. And so it did kind of have that platformer exploration thing as opposed to, grabbing gold or, kind of the standard tropes is that, this was a little more story driven and it was, it definitely had an emphasis on exploration.
Okay, so let's get back to my question. What is our theory of the game as we've seen it today?
Nostalgia.
No, but remember, I think when we put our theory of MAGFest together, we put our codes and categories together to come up with a description that we could explain to other people. So with that in mind, and given all the codes and categories we've come up with, what is our theory of this game?
Would that also almost be like a slogan for the game, theoretically?
Maybe. But not necessarily, a slogan is like more of a marketing term. A slogan may be anywhere from 2 to 5 words. We want something that's more descriptive, more rich, and describes what we've seen here today.
A story-driven type platformer?
Okay, we're still describing the game. Let me take a first stab at this, and I'm just kind of figuring this out along with the rest of you. We're talking about a game that relies on a certain amount of prior experience and motion, and certain things like motion and very narrow guidance in order to introduce people to the system that it's prepared. But for those who don't pick it up right away, there is no penalty if they need multiple tries. That's my theory. Anyone want to expand?
So a game that's low risk that encourages exploration on a room-by-room basis.
Okay. A game that who's I mean, you were talking sort of about the retro feel, but you also mentioned the colors. Do you think the colors would have been able to signify what they did if the game were more rich in colors and more complex?
I mean, yeah, there's a couple of times where I was thrown off by the colors a little bit, again, because, you know, the gray is usually a muted background tone as opposed to a more active tone. So, you know, I do think, so in some ways the color was very communicative, you know, and I do think it was trying to communicate a lot with a little, but it may have scaled back too much. It might be using too little to try to communicate effectively. But certainly, because in some places with, you know, what I believe were monsters, I didn't touch them, you know, but with the other moving things in the environment, you know, it was very clear to me to try to avoid those.
Okay.
Because they're a different color, so.
Based on what we've talked about, what's your theory of the game?
So, my theory of the game is, you know, it's trying to tell a story. So this is a story-driven game that is emphasizing exploration in a pseudo-safe environment.
Okay, I like that. Any other theories anyone has? Okay then, well in that case I'm going to call this to an end. Thanks Blake, give him a hand. Alright, so now you guys have gotten to understand how we apply this to one game. So, let's do it again. I plugged it in just to say that. Now, here's a game that I think I imagine almost none of you will have played because it is, does this look familiar to anyone? Samarost. Who wants to give it a try? Alright, in the blackjack in the middle. Come on up. Yeah. Give it a hand. And your name? Xander. All right, hey Xander. So, that first game was a little strange, but it was known by many in this audience. And even when it wasn't, you could see it was easy to pick up. I will warn you that this is going to be a little outside that bounds. It's going to be very different than I think the games most of us are used to seeing. That's one of the big reasons I picked it. Just as before, I'm not really going to give you any sort of feedback or any sort of introduction to it beyond what I've said. But again, we should all be paying attention to what he's doing and how he's doing it, and how exactly he starts to figure things out.
What kind of games do you play, Xander?
Yeah, what kind of gets good question? I talked to him.
I usually play a lot of platformers and JRPGs and like puzzle games.
Okay, so you might feel at home here.
Oh, cool.
All right, let's get started. Did you guys see this already? Do you need the lights to turn down? Okay, can one of you hand it's the LED? Oh.
What are your immediate impressions?
Yeah. What are you looking at here?
Well, from the looks of it, it's feels like maybe a bunch of weird alien things.
Okay, we've seen weird alien things.
There's a dog. Oh, okay.
You know something? So you got a piece of feedback that caused him to do something.
You feel like the good guy or the bad guy right now?
Currently the bad guy.
Okay. So you feel like he's the bad guy right now. I want to talk a little bit about how because there's one interaction so far that you've had with us. How did you figure that out?
As I was moving the mouse around, I noticed that the doghouse. I can click on it and interact with it.
So you got a piece of feedback from the environment that told them to do something. Is that accurate?
In a highlight, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, tell me what happened exactly.
It changed from the little pointer to the icon.
Okay. I think we've seen most of this before, right? We've seen the arrow change this. So in that sense, would you say it's relying on something that you recognized already?
Yes.
All right.
Did you just click on that tree?
Yes.
All right. Now what?
What character do you think you are?
Right now I'm thinking this little dude right here.
And that's a very interesting question to ask because the character, your role in this is not exactly clear, is it? No. Because, and so did you expect, let me put it this way, when I told you this was a puzzle game, what did you expect?
When I first saw, first little opening scene, I was expecting maybe a point and click adventure or something like that.
Okay. And how close is this to that expectation?
It's not too far off.
There's something that I like about this series. It's a little different than normal. And that's that, well, I'll let you, what do you think is different about this than a normal point-and-click adventure?
You're not exactly controlling the character, you're sort of controlling the environment.
You're controlling the environment.
That was actually going to be my question. With a point and click like this, where all of the animations and the outcomes are already kind of pre-programmed in, how much control do you feel like you really have?
Not that much. I feel like I'm sort of limited to what I can do.
Okay.
Why have you not clicked on anything else since?
I don't know, just sort of trying to think of that. Oh,
what happened here?
Okay.
Look at that. So what just happened here?
I saw that I was able to drag the bug.
Well, how did you figure that? How did you see you were able to drag the bug?
Again, it changed from the pointer to the click icon.
Okay. And then you clicked. And then you noticed, oh wait, my icon's the bug now.
Why didn't you then move it over to the right side where the character was?
Yeah, why did you do that? That was the first thing you did.
I saw that the bug was originally on this tree, so I was thinking maybe if I put it on a different tree, it would do something.
Okay. So that was a little bit of a, so the game was providing you some kind of context or clue for maybe what to do next. This is important.
What are you doing now?
It appears that the little guy is walking over to the other side of the screen.
Did you prompt that, or did it just happen?
I prompted it.
Yeah, you clicked, you found another place to click, right? So we're noticing a theme in terms of how we're moving through this game, right? What's clickable? And for a game, and so, why do you think that this particular game is structured this way? I have my own theory, I have my own ideas about why this is happening the way it is.
Well, I can see from the fact that it's in a web browser that it's written, it's like an HTML game.
Yeah.
So it's restricted by sort of the medium.
Okay. Or restricted, or maybe you could say they took advantage of it.
It forces your eye around the whole scene.
What do we think about the fact that we're manipulating the environment rather than the character? How does that change things?
It kind of takes away the standard because you're used to just moving your character and interacting with your team.
So it takes away the standard. So even for someone who, we talked about before how Blake was able to take cues from previous games to move through this one relatively easily. This one's kind of changing things up, right?
We're seeing exploring a lot of stuff, looking for something to click.
So we're hearing a lot about exploration again. This came up in both this game and the previous game, even though they're very different. Let's keep exploration in mind.
Do you feel that the game is punishing you in any way for trying out different things?
No.
Are you seeing a pattern with your actions here?
I'm seeing a lot of where one thing might affect another thing. So like with the bug, I put on the tree and the little guy was able to escape.
What do you think your goal is right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. What is it?
Right now, I'm thinking it's maybe to get what I think is water into this bucket.
Why do you think that?
Because that was sort of the first thing I noticed. I was able to click on the little valve here.
Okay.
And
Okay, so you can put water in the bucket. Why do you think that's your goal?
it looks like most of this is connected to the water.
So you're seeing a theme in the scenery.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you sort of like, I think what I see what you're saying is that you can sort of know that if you go back left, you can sort of see this pattern going from the main up all the way to the faucet through the right. So you can, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it looks like you're seeing a sort of like progression and a sort of theme across the context of the scene.
Yeah.
Awesome. What are some codes we're seeing here? Clicking. Clicking is big. Trial and error. So a lot of stuff we don't really know what's going on here. Freeform. We'll actually clarify that a little bit.
You haven't, like your, I guess, main character in the scene, just slowly slamming on the shell, he hasn't interacted with you, he hasn't told you what to do, so he's just more thinking around trying to figure out.
So maybe like directionless, or maybe, okay.
It's experimental.
Okay, how is it experimental how? In that
By coming to a result, I mean, you basically have to explore the space. You have to try different things to figure out what the meaning of the result is.
Okay.
Does Andrew, how do you feel about the lack of direction?
It feels like the game sort of leaves you to like your devices to figure out what you need to do. So it sort of gives that sense of, I guess, puzzle.
So do you feel encouraged or discouraged by that? Like I want to play more, or this is kind of annoying?
I guess more encouraged, or maybe a bit discouraged.
Okay, can you clarify that a little bit?
Because without the game telling me to do anything, I sort of just start to look around the screen on my own to see what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
But like at the same time, I don't have any direction to what I'm supposed to be doing, so it's sort of confusing.
Okay.
Do you think back to your documentation, and did that drive you at all to continue playing?
I haven't yet, but now that you mention it, a little.
How have you experimented with the controls or the UI or something? Like, is there what do the buttons do? Is it just click?
I've not tried it yet.
Good question.
Looks like everything's don't work.
You said earlier that you felt your goal was to get water into that barrel on the right. What makes you think that it's water that you're trying to get into the barrel, as opposed to some other substance?
Well, I mean, water is just usually the first thing I think of when I'm thinking liquids.
Are there any other signs or clues that the game is showing you that might indicate that also?
Well, when I pressed the faucet, the blue droplet that came out was sort of blue.
Okay. That's a good point. So we have you don't have to raise your hand.
Well, so I think you had asked a question about the pacing and the guidance. I'm not a gamer, so I look at it from a very different kind of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were saying that you were very encouraged, that you had the opportunity to explore and kind of figure it out on your own. I would be done at this point. Like with no guidance, I'd be like, this is just what's straight to me. Versus the first game that you showed, where there was a clear path. Even if I didn't know what to do, there was enough direction to give me something to focus on.
So you would have been discouraged by this lack of direction, and you wouldn't have seen it through. But you are interested in seeing it through, at least somewhat. What are the elements that are encouraging you or make you interested in going further?
I guess maybe how would I describe it? like you find something that you can do, and from there start to think like, how does this affect maybe this?
So you're encouraged by the actions you can take. Okay, we're gonna remember that. Back, yeah.
Story-wise, what are you curious about right now? Because there's a lot of unexplained like story elements I think going on in this scene.
I'm sort of curious about what was up with the dog? Like, why did it take my dog?
Now look at what you just did. You figured that out. You realized you had a cap on you that you could do that with, huh?
And
Can you think of any immediate or not immediate ways that pouring a glass of water helps you find your dog somehow?
Yeah, we're getting back to this water. We kind of have a sense that's what we're supposed to do here, but do we have a sense of how that ties into the larger goal?
Not quite. All I'm thinking really is maybe it'll help the slug here, who we haven't interacted with at all. I can't interact with them.
So we still have the slug. Now why do you think the slug's important?
Because firstly, you can have hostile from the environment.
Okay.
And secondly, he's sort of just hammering on this. He's moving.
He's moving. We talked about movement before. Movement in the previous game signifies something that we should avoid. But in this case, we know that movement is something. Would you think it'd be fair to say that movement signifies importance or relevance?
Yes.
Okay. That's something important to remember. This is important for any game. If something is moving, it's going to draw our attention. That's just who we naturally are as people. And movement in a game probably signifies something that people are going to pay attention to.
How do you save or next to the game? How do you save next to the game?
That's a good question. That might not be too apparent from just looking at it.
Could you repeat the question?
He wanted to know how to save or exit the game.
Save or exit the game, it doesn't look like, well, it says low level. So, I'm assuming there's some way to save it.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it is.
Here, I'm gonna speed this along a little bit. I'm gonna help you out a little bit. Have you tried the fire wheel?
I have tried the fire wheel.
Alright, so you got that.
You already sprinkled the...
I've sprinkled stuff in.
Now, what happened with the pump again?
With the pump.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be working.
Okay, why not?
Well, I thought originally that it was this, but...
Okay, well, maybe that's part of it. How many times do you usually need to pump something before it works?
A couple.
There we go. I don't know, is it? So, okay. I think we've got enough now. Ooh. Do what?
Sprinkles, whatever this is.
Okay. So, we got that. Ooh. So there we go, we were right. We had this idea that pouring the water would help us, and it did.
Do you feel a sense of accomplishment?
Yes.
I don't mind that I prodded you a little bit.
I probably need it. That's why I don't really mind that.
It's okay to make a comment.
Sure.
It seems like you're very cautious about what you're clicking. Like if it was me, I'd be like click, 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 click. I could just like click everything. But I just noticed you seem very like conservative about your clicking. I just wonder why.
Well, I know in like other games of this sort,
there we go.
Sometimes if you do things incorrectly, it'll result in you dying.
So let's give Xander a hand. All right, so let's talk a little bit about your experience here. Discern said, so like before you had some prior experience in the genre this is representing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how do you think that informed your experience this time around?
I think that it sort of drew my eyes to certain things, and like the woman over there was pointing out, it was sort of, I was a bit more cautious of what I was clicking.
Mm-hmm. Because you thought there might be some penalties.
Yeah.
Okay.
On that note, do you think if there was a reload level button on the screen, you'd be a little bit more not conscientious of the order you're clicking things?
Maybe not as much, but I think I would still be a bit cautious.
Okay. Yeah?
What role do you feel sound played for you?
Sound?
Yeah, this is a pretty minimalist game, music and sound wise.
I didn't really notice much music, but there were sounds. I feel like maybe if something were to happen off screen, then that would sort of tell me that it happened.
So let's get back to the codes and categories. Well, we talked about some codes, and what do you think are our categories in general feeling? And we'll skip to the theory too. What do you think our categories are? So I'd say like environments is a big category, and it's not a code because environment can be very different things. Or even manipulating the environment because we are exploring how the environment actually responds to our whatever our role is as the player, how it's responding to our clicks.
I would say context clues, but would that be more of a code than a category?
Well, I'd say, because again, context and clues can both mean very different things, so I'd say that's more of a category. And that we can put these different codes that we were talking about into. For example, the clicking of the icon, that's a big context clue.
Yeah.
And we know that's a context clue in this context because of that.
Cause and effect.
Cause and effect.
Problem solving?
Problem solving. Okay, which codes feed into that? And almost every video game is a problem solving in some sense.
The context, the cause and effect, definitely. Some of the environmental stuff.
Okay. Yeah, it's just important to know, like, when you say that in this thing, you know what you mean. You don't have to raise your hand.
Oh, sorry. I noticed this might also have to do with context, but the visual aesthetics helped you sort of understand what the different things on the screen meant, even though visualized it looked like very sort of fantastic.
Do you agree with that? How do the visual cues really help you?
Well, for certain things like the anteater objects, I noticed that they had a slightly different, I guess, artistic style. Like the colors seemed a bit different.
Okay.
So I saw them moving, so I thought these must be important to what I'm doing.
All right. So what kind of theory are we looking at for this game? Remember, we bridged the codes and categories together to come up with something more comprehensive, or fairly comprehensive. I'd say, so Semaros is a minimalist game in which you manipulate the environment to move your protagonist towards his goal. That's my first take at it. You don't need to raise your hand.
An interactive art experiment?
An interactive art experiment. That's nice.
It's a game that requires you to use elements of environment, visuals, and sound to get the proper context to solve puzzles.
I like that one. You get the proper context to solve puzzles because you're manipulating the environment rather than the characters. What you can even do is much more up for speculation, right?
I feel like without instructions kind of needs to be added in there because
without it, yes, that's right.
There's no text, there's nothing to really guide you to doing anything.
And that brings us back to the question of exploration. A lot of old games, so a lot of new games, like modern games, will have all these instructions baked into the game. You go and you hear the tutorial, you have some annoying character voicing over everything you can and can't do. It's very, versus this, something like this, where you're just kind of thrust into the middle of it. And you figure out, a lot of old games work this way, where you have to sort of figure out what you can do and what you couldn't do. So I think we're pretty much out of time here, but I'm going to leave you guys with one last question. Neither of these games had much instruction to them, but we were able to move through them. What's the difference between that and the Sonic 3 barrel? Sure.
because the sort of visual and sound cues are a lot more apparent than the barrel, because like the only real hint that you have in Sonic 3 barrels is when you get them, they kind of bounce a bit.
Mhm.
That's about it.
Okay.
It uses repetitious mechanics, so once you learn something, you continue to use that ability, or what you learned at a point to continue the game.
You don't need to raise your hand, just talk.
Even if it was just a trial by error exploration, the exploration itself usually led to some type of progress.
Okay.
The Sonic Barrel was new mechanics after you'd already learned how to interact with the Sonic environment. You had sort of learned all the rules, and then with no warning whatsoever, there was a new rule. Whereas with the point-and-click adventure game, there were no rules, you had no idea what you were going to click, so you might as well just click anyway.
All right, congratulations. You guys can all design a better game than Sonic 3 now. Now, this is how gaming ethnography works, I'd say. This is more or less how it's done. It's a powerful tool and a powerful framework for really understanding what's around you. It's more formal than observe and figure out. That's a lot of what we're doing here, but this gives us the codes or the categories. They may seem a little subjective or a little arbitrary, but they really give us a structure for putting the data points that we're seeing into something tangible and something knowable. And it can help to build a vocabulary of player actions. You know, as we talk about the vocabulary of what people can do when they come to expect from different games, very greatly. And might I add, this all happened in a very short amount of time. Now, we never did spend too much time on either of these games, and I actually had a third one planned, so it would have been even shorter. But people can come up with these certain expectations of game systems very quickly, and it's important to define what those are from the outset. And so again, no matter what your role in gaming design is or gaming interaction, something like this can be a very powerful tool and a very powerful method for understanding more about how this works. All right, that's my time, so this is how you can reach me.